The small, brightly colored box, festive in its crimson and gold wrapping paper, that crackled gently as he shifted it in his lap, sat innocently between my father's large, calloused hands. Around us, the Mitchell living room buzzed with the quiet, contented hum of Christmas morning, the rustle of discarded tissue paper forming drifts on the carpet, the soft clinking of coffee mugs against porcelain saucers, the distant, muffled carols from the kitchen radio, a cheerful, almost oblivious soundtrack to our family ritual. The air was thick with the scent of freshly cut pine needles from the towering tree in the corner, warm vanilla from my mother's cooling sugar cookies on the antique sideboard, and the faint, familiar aroma of old books and fireplace smoke, a comforting blend that defined home. "It's a 23andMe kit, Dad," I'd chirped, my voice filled with genuine excitement, my knees aching slightly from kneeling on the plush carpet beside his armchair, my elbows resting on my thighs. "We can finally explore your mysterious Irish ancestry, maybe find some long-lost cousins or a chieftain or two." Thomas Mitchell, my father, the revered pastor of Hope Valley Community Church, chuckled, his deep, resonant voice, usually reserved for powerful sermons that filled the sanctuary with conviction, now a warm, rumbling sound in our cozy living room. He'd patted my hand, a loving, familiar gesture that always conveyed warmth and reassurance, his eyes crinkling at the corners in that way that always made me feel seen, cherished, and utterly secure. 3 months later, on a Tuesday morning, a single message, cold and digital, appeared on my computer screen, its stark white background searing itself into my retina, chilling me to the bone. "Hello, my name is Clara, and according to 23andMe, you're my half-sister." Then another, and another. The brightly colored box, a symbol of innocent curiosity, had not merely uncovered our roots. It had ripped open the very foundation of my life, exposing a monstrous 40-year secret that would redefine every memory, every relationship, every truth I had ever clung to, leaving me adrift in a sea of devastating lies and an unshakable sense of profound violation. My life, until that moment, had been a meticulously painted portrait of quiet, suburban contentment, framed by predictable routines and unwavering constants. At 36, I was a high school counselor, my days filled with the hopeful, sometimes heartbreaking dramas of teenagers navigating their nascent identities, their whispered anxieties, and burgeoning dreams. My office, a cheerful space with soft blue walls and posters advocating kindness and resilience, often smelled of stale coffee and adolescent angst, a unique blend of nervous energy and artificial cherry air freshener. But I found immense satisfaction in guiding those young, uncertain minds, helping them chart a course through the tumultuous waters of adolescence. My own identity, however, felt as solid as bedrock, as immutable as the granite foundation of our town's public library. I was Lauren Mitchell, daughter of Pastor Thomas Mitchell and Clara Mitchell. Our family was, in the eyes of the Hope Valley community, a beacon, a living testament to faith and virtue. My father, with his silver hair always impeccably parted, kind, crinkling eyes that seemed to hold boundless compassion, and booming, comforting voice, had preached about family values, fidelity, and unwavering faith from the pulpit for 40 years. His sermons weren't just eloquent. They were the moral compass for hundreds of families, including our own. His words echoing through the sanctuary every Sunday, building a sense of trust, community, and moral certainty. Our childhood home, a modest but well-maintained split level, nestled on a tree-lined street where children's laughter often drifted in from sprinklers in summer, always smelled faintly of lemon polish and my mother's baking, a sweet, comforting aroma that whispered of stability, of home, of a life without discord. My mother, Clara, had been the quiet strength behind his public persona, a woman of grace and profound resilience. Her hands always busy with gardening or knitting, her heart always open, her laughter a soft, melodic counterpoint to my father's booming voice, a gentle, constant presence. She had passed away 2 years prior, a quiet fading after a brief but brutal battle with pancreatic cancer, leaving a void in my life that still ached with a raw, unyielding pain, a constant, dull throb in my chest, a phantom limb of grief. Her memory, pure and loving, was a sacred trust, a sanctuary of untainted love that I cherished above all else. Our family narrative, filled with picnics on sun-drenched Sundays after church, bustling church functions that felt like extended family gatherings, and my father's frequent ministry trips, mission work in Appalachia, conferences in Denver, visiting ailing congregants in other states, was one of unwavering devotion, a testament to enduring love and shared purpose. I genuinely believed we were a testament to the very values my father preached, a living embodiment of the strength of faith and family, utterly oblivious to the gaping, cavernous chasm that lay beneath our feet, a precipice of lies waiting to swallow me whole, a truth more terrifying than any fiction. The first message from Clara had been easy to dismiss, a digital anomaly, a glitch in the genetic matrix, a phantom limb of information that my mind immediately rejected. I'd been sipping my morning tea, the steam warming my face, a gentle comfort against the cool morning air, scrolling through emails, planning my week, when the notification from 23andMe popped up, innocuous enough, beckoning me to review my father's results. I clicked, a casual curiosity guiding my mouse. Then the message, clear and concise. My name is Clara O'Malley. Our DNA suggests a half-sister relationship. My father is Thomas O'Malley, originally from Kentucky. Is there any chance of a connection? I remember staring at the screen, a half-eaten bowl of oatmeal growing cold on my desk, the taste of cinnamon and brown sugar turning to dust in my mouth, suddenly unappetizing. A nervous laugh bubbled up, light and disbelieving, a sound that felt alien in the quiet of my kitchen. Thomas O'Malley? My father was Thomas Mitchell, born and raised in Ohio, solid as the earth beneath my feet. This Clara must be mistaken, a common occurrence with these tests, I reasoned, already formulating a polite, dismissive reply in my head, trying to brush away the unsettling flicker of doubt that had ignited, a tiny, persistent spark in my gut. But then her next message arrived, a day later, more persistent, softer, more vulnerable, less easily dismissed. I know this might be strange, but my mother dated a Thomas Mitchell for a few years in the late 80s when she was living in Kentucky. He was a traveling minister, she said, very charismatic. Is that your father? The words hit me like a physical blow, a sudden sharp coldness in my stomach, like a rock dropping into a deep dark well, sending ripples of unease through me. The ministry trips. My father had often been away for weeks, sometimes months, in the late 80s, doing mission work across the Midwest and South, his absence explained away by the demands of his sacred calling, his dedication to God. My hand trembled as I typed, hovering over the keyboard, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a trapped bird, desperate to escape, desperate for air. What was your mother's name? I asked, dread coiling in my gut, tightening into a suffocating knot, a premonition of something terrible. Something life-altering, beginning to unfold, threatening to shatter the very glass of my reality, leaving jagged edges behind. Clara responded almost immediately, her tone cautiously optimistic, a fragile hope laced through her words that I could almost taste through the screen. My mother's name was Sarah. Sarah Jenkins. She lived in Lexington, Kentucky. Thomas was a charismatic man, she always said, very passionate about his work. He used to send her postcards from his travels, little snippets of his adventures. My fingers, cold and clumsy, navigated to my father's old photo albums, the thick, leather-bound books that smelled faintly of vanilla and aged paper, tucked away on a dusty shelf in the back of the den. I rarely looked at them now. The grief for my mother still too raw, too close to the surface. I flipped through pages from the late 80s, past pictures of younger versions of my parents, their faces beaming with a youthful, naive joy, past blurry shots of childhood birthday parties, of summer vacations that now seemed impossibly idyllic. There, tucked away in a dusty corner of a page from 1987, almost hidden by a curling corner of faded sepia, a small, slightly out-of-focus photograph. My father, younger, with more color in his cheeks, a bolder, perhaps less guarded smile, standing beside a pretty blonde woman with a bright, open smile, her arm linked casually through his, her hand resting warmly on his bicep. Sarah. The name pulsed in my mind, a relentless drumbeat, a siren's wail, demanding attention, demanding recognition. My phone buzzed again, this time with a new notification from 23andMe, the sound cutting through the sudden, suffocating silence of my apartment like a knife. You have a new close relative match, Marcus Miller. Another half-sibling. My breath hitched, a silent scream caught in my throat, choking me, stealing my air. Marcus, from Ohio. His message was brief, direct, almost abrupt, devoid of Claire's cautious optimism. My mother was involved with a Thomas Mitchell in the late 80s, early 90s. I've known about Claire and a couple of others for years. Are you? Lauren? The sheer scope of it began to dawn on me, a monstrous, horrifying realization that sent shivers down my spine, turning my blood to ice, freezing me in place. Not just one secret, not two, but a sprawling, decades-long tapestry of deception woven by the man who had preached unwavering fidelity from the holiest of places, whose booming voice had echoed with moral certainty. My entire childhood, my family, the bedrock of my existence, began to crack and crumble, revealing a terrifying, gaping chasm beneath, threatening to swallow me whole, to erase every cherished memory, every supposed truth. The avalanche began, swift and merciless, burying me under a deluge of revelations. Message after message, email after email, phone calls from unfamiliar numbers that I answered with a trembling hand and a pounding heart, each one a fresh torrent of revelations, a new face, a new story. Claire, Marcus, then Jessica from Indiana, her voice brimming with a brittle anger that vibrated through the phone line. David from Illinois, quiet and reflective, his words carefully chosen, almost melancholic. Emily from Missouri, her words tinged with a deep, lingering sadness, a profound sense of loss that mirrored my own. 6 children. 5 different women. Across 3 states. All roughly my age, their birth years spanning the late 1980s to the early 1990s. Precisely the period of my father's most frequent and extensive ministry trips. The absences that had once seemed so noble, so selfless. Each DNA match was irrefutable, undeniable proof. A cold, clinical confirmation of a sprawling, horrifying double life, a betrayal of monumental proportions that spanned decades, continents of deceit. I sat at my kitchen table for days, a permanent indentation forming on the wooden surface where my elbows rested, bathed in the harsh, unflattering glow of my laptop screen, surrounded by printouts of family trees I was forced to construct, meticulously mapping out the branching lines of his hidden progeny. Birth certificates downloaded from public records, old photographs sent by these strangers who were now inexplicably family, their faces a confusing blend of unfamiliarity and uncanny resemblance. A detective, I was piecing together the fragments of a shattered reality, a life built on quicksand, on shifting lies. The smell of the instant coffee I'd brewed, usually comforting, now tasted like ash in my mouth, acrid and bitter, leaving a coating on my tongue. My vision blurred, tears streaming down my face, not just for myself, for my own profound loss of innocence and certainty, but for my mother. For the woman who had lived and died in blissful ignorance, her unwavering love and loyalty repaid with a lifetime of profound, calculated deception. The pain was a physical ache, a knot of grief, anger, and betrayal twisting in my gut, leaving me gasping for air, clutching at my stomach, questioning every cherished memory, every tender moment, every word my father had ever uttered about faith and family, wondering if any of it had ever been true, if he had ever been true. As I absorbed the sheer scope of the betrayal, the intricate details of his double life began to emerge, each revelation a fresh wound, twisting the knife deeper into my already shredded heart. Claire told me about her high school graduation in a sun-drenched Kentucky gymnasium, how her Uncle Tom, as she'd known him then, had driven 2 states to be there, not just to visit, but to cheer her on from the stands, a proud smile on his face, a hand on her shoulder as she accepted her diploma, a father figure in plain sight. This was the same week my father had called home, his voice raspy, claiming he was laid low by a severe flu bug in a remote, poverty-stricken parish in Ohio, lamenting his inability to return home. Emily tearfully recounted how her father, Thomas, had walked her down the aisle, his arm linked in hers, giving her away at her wedding, the very image of a doting, devoted father. While I, his only legitimate daughter, watched photos of the event from his Facebook profile, a hollow ache in my chest, as my own wedding dreams were still a distant, uncertain future. This happened the exact weekend he'd told my mother and me he was at a demanding, solitary missionary conference in rural Nebraska, deep in prayer and reflection. Marcus shared photos of birthday parties, Christmases, even a week-long camping trip in the Rockies, the smell of pine and campfire smoke almost reaching me through the digital images, with Uncle Tom always present, always beaming, always playing the part of the devoted family man, a master of disguise, seamlessly slipping between identities. Jessica showed me cards, almost love letters, from my father to her mother, written on hotel stationery from different states, dated precisely to his supposed absences from us. David, the artist, had saved a series of whimsical drawings my father had sent him as a child, each one dated, corresponding to a supposed absence from our home. Little tokens of affection to his secret children. All these events took place during dates that perfectly aligned with my father's meticulously scheduled ministry trips. The times he'd told my mother and me he was doing God's work, saving souls in distant towns, fulfilling his sacred calling, while he was, in fact, living another life entirely. But the deepest cut, the one that truly twisted my gut, came when I learned about the financial support. While my mother worked 2 jobs, teaching during the day, her classroom filled with the noise of restless teenagers, tutoring in the evenings, her hands rough from constant work, her shoulders perpetually tired, stretching every dollar to cover my college applications, to keep our old sedan running, to ensure we never went without, denying herself small luxuries. Thomas had been providing substantial financial support to 2 of his secret families. Clara and Marcus both confirmed consistent payments for piano lessons, summer camps, new clothes, even contributing significantly to their college funds, affording them opportunities I had to work tirelessly for. He had prioritized them, financially and emotionally, while my mother, his wife of 40 years, struggled, scrimping and saving, utterly unaware that her husband's money, their money, was supporting other children, other lives, built on the scaffolding of his elaborate, callous lies. The hypocrisy was a bitter, burning bile in my throat, choking me with its profound injustice, its absolute cruelty, a suffocating realization of how deeply we had been deceived. The betrayal was a suffocating blanket, heavy and inescapable, pressing down on my chest, making each breath a conscious effort, filling my lungs with a suffocating tightness that never seemed to fully release. My father, the moral pillar of our community, the man who had instilled in me a deep sense of right and wrong, of truth and integrity, had lived a monumental, meticulously constructed lie for 40 years, a deceptive masterpiece. My childhood, once a sanctuary of loving memories, a safe haven filled with the gentle rhythm of family life, now felt like a carefully constructed stage play, every scene tainted by the knowledge of his deceit, every tender moment potentially a performance, a cynical manipulation. The quiet moments with my mother, her comforting presence, her gentle wisdom, her unwavering faith, were now infused with a heartbreaking poignancy, knowing she had lived and died without ever truly knowing the man she married, her life a testament to a love that was, for him, a convenient facade, a public-facing deception. The anger at my father was a white-hot fire searing through my veins, a consuming inferno that threatened to reduce everything to ashes, but beneath it, a colder, deeper hurt festered. The realization that I, his only legitimate child, his publicly acknowledged daughter, had been sidelined, financially and emotionally, for these secret families, these other lives he had chosen to cultivate. My college fund, which had been modest, requiring me to take out significant loans, piling on debt, could have been more substantial, easing my mother's crushing burden, preventing her from working herself to exhaustion, from the slow erosion of her health. My father's presence, his time, his emotional energy had been divided, scattered across 3 states, leaving me with only a fraction of his genuine devotion. He had attended other daughters' weddings, other sons' graduations, while I had only his hurried calls from distant hotel rooms, his vague promises of being home soon, his excuses always plausible, always wrapped in the cloak of his ministry, his sacred calling. The thought was a raw, gaping wound, a profound sense of abandonment that twisted my gut, leaving me adrift, unmoored in a world where everything I believed to be true had been a meticulously crafted illusion, a cruel, elaborate trick designed to preserve his monstrous secret. My father's phone call, when it finally came, wasn't one of remorse or genuine confession, but of desperate, frantic self-preservation, a calculated attempt to manage the damage. I had sent him a brief, chilling email, attaching Claire's and Marcus's DNA reports, leaving no room for denial, no space for his usual evasions or clever sermons. His voice, when I answered, was tight, strained, devoid of its usual booming authority, sounding smaller, weaker, more frantic than I had ever heard it, almost pathetic. "Lauren," he began, his voice barely above a whisper laced with a false sense of vulnerability, an attempt at regaining control. I can explain. It was a different time. Young foolishness. It meant nothing, darling. You must understand." His words were a fresh wave of nausea, minimizing decades of calculated deceit, of 7 lives shaped by his choices, of a lifetime of profound lies, reducing it all to a trivial mistake. A youthful indiscretion. "Nothing, Dad?" I bit back, my voice shaking with barely suppressed fury, each word cutting through his feigned helplessness, sharp as a razor. 6 children, 5 women, 40 years of lies, and you call it nothing? Mom died believing you were a faithful husband, a devoted partner. She struggled, Dad. She worked herself sick, her body breaking down, while you were playing doting father to other families, sending them money, attending their milestones, living a full, rich life with them. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening, punctuated only by my ragged breathing, the sound of my own furious heart hammering against my ribs. Then his voice, regaining some of its old persuasive cadence, softened, becoming pleading, manipulative, a practiced tone of spiritual persuasion. "Lauren, please, for the sake of the church, for the sake of the hundreds of families who depend on me, who look to me for guidance, for moral leadership. This would destroy everything. My legacy, the work of a lifetime. Please, my daughter, keep this quiet. For my sake, for everyone's sake. Think of the damage to the community, the shattering of their faith." His plea, steeped in hypocrisy, was another betrayal, demanding that I become complicit in his lie, sacrificing my own truth, my mother's memory, my very sense of self, for the sake of his carefully constructed public image, his carefully guarded reputation, leaving me with a burning moral dilemma that threatened to consume me whole, tearing at the very fabric of my being, forcing an impossible choice. The moral dilemma was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe, filling my lungs with a suffocating tightness that never seemed to fully release, a constant pressure that left me exhausted. On one hand, there was the church, Hope Valley community, the cornerstone of my childhood, a place of comfort and belonging for so many, a vibrant hub of support, a sanctuary for hundreds. My father had built it, nurtured it, from a small, struggling congregation to a thriving community, guided its congregants through countless crises, baptisms, funerals, weddings, all with his golden tongue and comforting presence. Exposing him would not only shatter his reputation, obliterate his public image, but would undoubtedly send shockwaves through the entire community, potentially destroying the very institution that supported hundreds of families, dissolving their faith, their trust in a world that suddenly felt rotten at its core, eroding their very foundation. The thought of that collateral damage, the ripple effect of my actions, the innocent lives that would be touched, made me tremble, a cold tremor running through my body, a deep, unsettling anxiety. On the other hand, there was the truth, raw and undeniable. The decades of deception, the pain inflicted on my mother, on me, and on these newfound siblings who were also victims of his monstrous charade, their lives forever marked by his choices. My father had prioritized his public image, his carefully curated legacy, over his own family, over honesty, over basic human decency, over genuine love. Could I truly honor my mother's memory by protecting the man who had so thoroughly betrayed her, who had lied to her until her dying breath, who had used her as a prop in his elaborate charade? Could I live with myself, knowing I was complicit in his continued lie, perpetually haunted by the ghosts of his deceit, by the unspoken pain of my mother's hidden suffering? The conflicting emotions tore at me, leaving me exhausted, adrift in a sea of impossible choices, each path fraught with its own unique brand of heartbreak and consequence, forcing me to confront the very definition of right and wrong, of justice and mercy, in the most agonizing way imaginable, questioning everything I had ever believed. In the quiet solitude of my apartment, the walls seeming to close in on me, the air thick with my own unspoken turmoil, I spent days replaying every conversation, every revelation, every painful detail, each memory a fresh stab. The vibrant colors of my apartment, usually a source of comfort, now seemed to mock my inner turmoil, the cheerful yellow kitchen a cruel contrast to the bleakness in my soul. The photos of Emily's wedding, my father beaming proudly as he walked her down the aisle, his face wreathed in joy. The same weekend he'd called my mother from a mission trip in Alabama, complaining of a terrible fever, his voice raspy, a performance to explain his absence. The financial statements I now had, painstakingly gathered, showing regular, substantial transfers from his personal account to Claire's mother, while my own mother had meticulously budgeted every grocery bill, patched worn-out clothes, and postponed dental work, all to make ends meet, denying herself small comforts, slowly eroding her health and spirit. The rage was a white-hot fire, a consuming inferno that threatened to reduce everything to ashes, to burn away all that was good. But it was coupled with a profound grief for the childhood I thought I had, for the father I thought I knew, for the stability that was revealed to be a fragile illusion. I stopped answering his calls, the phone vibrating angrily on my countertop, a relentless buzz against the silence, his pleas for silence growing more desperate, his texts increasingly frantic, demanding to know what I was doing, what my intentions were. I needed clarity. A path forward that honored the truth without being consumed by bitterness. A path that sought genuine healing and not just destructive anger. My work as a high school counselor had taught me the importance of clear-eyed decision-making, of separating emotion from action, of finding solutions in crisis, of guiding others through their darkest moments. But this was different. This was personal. Deeply, searingly personal. Cutting to the very core of my being. Threatening to dismantle me. I realized that keeping his secret wouldn't protect my mother's memory. It would dishonor her, validate his decades of deception, and sentence me to a lifetime of complicity. A silent partner in his lies, perpetually haunted by the ghosts of his deceit. I needed to forge a new path, a path towards a justice that was not merely punitive but restorative, a path that sought to heal the wounds his lies had inflicted, not just on me, but on everyone he had touched. To redefine family on my own terms, to finally breathe free. My first conscious decision, after weeks of agonizing introspection, fueled by countless sleepless nights staring at the ceiling and endless cups of lukewarm tea, was to reach out to all the siblings. Not just Claire and Marcus, who had initiated contact, but Jessica, David, and Emily too. It was a terrifying prospect. Opening myself up to more raw emotion, more pain, more shattered narratives, to the unpredictable reactions of strangers who were, biologically, inextricably linked to me, but strangers nonetheless. But I knew, instinctively, that a united front was the only way to truly confront my father's lies without becoming lost in my own individual grief and anger, without being easily dismissed or manipulated by his persuasive charm. I set up a private, encrypted group chat on a secure platform, my fingers trembling as I typed out my first message, introducing myself as Lauren Mitchell, their half-sister, the daughter of Thomas Mitchell, the name feeling heavy on my tongue, weighty with unspoken history. The initial responses were a mix of shock, guarded curiosity, and an almost palpable tension, some wary, some eager, some simply stunned into disbelief. They had known about each other, in varying degrees, a whispered understanding among them, a network of shared secrets. But the existence of me, the child from his primary, public family, was a profound revelation, shaking their own sense of reality, adding another layer to the already complex tapestry of their lives. We exchanged cautious messages, a slow dance of vulnerability and suspicion, testing the waters, before agreeing to a video call. A virtual gathering across 3 states, arranged for a Saturday morning when we could all be relatively free, cloistered in our own homes, safely behind screens. The moment my screen populated with 5 unfamiliar faces, all sharing subtle echoes of my father's features, the curve of an eyebrow, the shape of a smile, the intensity in their eyes, the exact set of his jaw, a particular way they held their heads, a profound, unsettling wave of recognition washed over me. It was like looking into a distorted mirror, seeing versions of myself, of my father, refracted through different lives, different experiences, yet undeniably connected by the invisible threads of DNA. This was my new family, born of deception, brought together by a cruel twist of fate, and the raw, complicated journey of knowing them, of truly belonging, had just begun, promising both pain and a fragile, deeply uncertain hope. The video call was a maelstrom of emotions, a a raw, unedited glimpse into the complex, interconnected lives my father had secretly woven, each story a thread in his deceitful tapestry. Our voices, initially hesitant, soon overlapped, a cacophony of shared pain and unanswered questions, a torrent of grief and anger. Claire, bright and articulate, her long red hair falling over her shoulders, spoke first, her voice a little shaky as she described her mother Sarah's lingering sadness over Thomas's evasiveness. His broken promises of a future that never fully materialized, the years spent waiting for a commitment that never came, leaving her with a profound sense of abandonment. Marcus, a burly, thoughtful man with my father's exact eyes, now tinged with a deep melancholy, spoke of the pride he felt in his Uncle Tom, how he'd always felt a special, almost magnetic connection to him, even before knowing the truth of their kinship, how he'd unknowingly modeled his own life after the man he thought he knew, the moral figure he admired. Jessica, sharp-edged and visibly angry, her jaw tight, recounted her mother's bitter resentment, how Thomas's occasional disappearances had created instability, whispers in their small Indiana town, the constant pressure of a secret, the shame that clung to them. David, a quiet, introspective artist, his hands stained with paint, spoke of the confusion, the yearning for a consistent father figure, the hollow space in his childhood where a stable male presence should have been, leaving him perpetually searching. And Emily, the one my father had walked down the aisle, sobbed quietly, clutching a framed wedding photo, her face streaked with tears, the image of their shared lie tearing at her, her most cherished memory now poisoned, a beautiful facade hiding a sickening truth. We shared stories of birthdays, holidays, significant life events, my father a central, chameleon-like figure in all of them, adapting his persona to fit each unique family, each woman, each child, a master of deception. The revelations about the financial support he had given to some, while others struggled in poverty, created new fissures, new layers of resentment and pain among us, adding another layer of injustice to the already agonizing truth. The shared experience, however painful, was also incredibly bonding. We were all victims of his elaborate charade, bound by a common, inescapable truth, slowly beginning to understand the enormity of his deceit and the devastating ripple effect it had caused across generations. As the call ended, a fragile sense of solidarity had begun to form, a silent agreement that we could no longer allow his lies to define our individual lives, or his carefully constructed reputation to overshadow our collective truth, our collective right to heal and reclaim our narratives. The next few weeks were dedicated to gathering a comprehensive dossier of my father's deception, a chilling exposé of his double life that would leave no room for doubt. I needed more than just DNA evidence and anecdotal stories. I needed irrefutable documentation that would stand up to the scrutiny of the church board and potentially the wider public, if it came to that, if his desperate attempts to silence me continued. Each of my half-siblings, now united in a shared purpose that transcended their individual pain and fostered a burgeoning sense of collective strength, contributed their pieces of the puzzle. Claire provided meticulous records of the financial support her mother had received, carefully filed bank statements clearly showing regular transfers from Thomas Mitchell's personal account, a consistent stream of money flowing for decades, a financial pipeline of deceit. Marcus, surprisingly methodical for an artist, had kept a detailed journal of Uncle Tom's visits, including precise dates, locations, and even specific gifts, which I painstakingly cross-referenced with my father's published itineraries for ministry trips and his credit card statements, finding glaring discrepancies. Emily, in a heart-wrenching act of courage, allowed me to scrutinize her wedding guest book and photo albums, confirming my father's attendance during a period he claimed to be leading a strenuous revival in rural Texas. His name clearly signed in the guest book, his face beaming in the photographs, an undeniable presence. Jessica shared old letters, almost love letters, from my father to her mother, written on hotel stationery from different states, dated precisely to his supposed absences from us, filled with tender words and promises that were always broken. David, the artist, had saved a series of whimsical drawings my father had sent him as a child, each one dated, corresponding to a supposed absence from our home, little tokens of affection to his secret children, a physical record of his divided heart. I accessed my own mother's old financial records, a painstaking process of digging through dusty boxes in the attic, the faint smell of mothballs filling my nose, confirming her 2 jobs, the careful budgeting, the constant struggle to stretch every dollar, to patch worn-out clothes, and to postpone dental work, all to make ends meet, denying herself small comforts, slowly eroding her health and spirit. This was a stark and agonizing contrast to the comfortable lives some of my half-siblings had enjoyed due to my father's hidden generosity. I also started pulling public records related to my father's property ownership and any legal documents that might shed light on his financial affairs over the decades, looking for any hidden assets or inconsistencies that would reveal the depth of his financial manipulation. The sheer volume of evidence was staggering, painting a comprehensive, undeniable picture of a decades-long double life. A pastor who meticulously built a public image of piety while weaving a complex web of personal deceit, leaving no room for doubt about the extent of his manipulation, his calculated duplicity, his profound betrayal. The decision to confront the church board was not made lightly. I agonized over it for days, the question a heavy stone in my stomach, my conscience torn between the desire for justice and the fear of destroying a community that had been a bedrock of support for my mother and me throughout our lives, a place of genuine connection and faith for so many. I spoke with Ms. Henderson, the director of the Westside Community Development Council, from the David Chen story, a new contact from Eleanor Vance, who offered seasoned guidance, her voice calm and steady, her insights invaluable. She wasn't personally involved in my situation, but her experience with exposing systemic injustice resonated deeply with mine, her wisdom invaluable. Eleanor Vance, the retired lawyer who had advised David Chen, also became a silent mentor, lending her moral clarity to my dilemma, reminding me of the importance of integrity, of standing firm on principle. They both helped me frame my thinking, not as an act of revenge, a spiteful lash out at a flawed man, but as a painful necessity for truth and accountability, for healing, for breaking a cycle of lies. I wasn't seeking to destroy faith. I was seeking to expose hypocrisy, to excise a cancer that festered beneath the surface of the congregation, threatening its very soul. The church board I knew was comprised of respected elders, men and women who genuinely believed in my father's moral integrity, who had walked alongside him for decades, placing their trust, their very spiritual guidance, in his hands. They deserved the truth, however ugly, before he was allowed to simply retire, his legacy untarnished, his deception unacknowledged, another victim of his carefully curated life. I drafted a careful, detailed letter requesting a private meeting, ensuring every word was precise, every phrase measured, stating only that I had urgent information regarding Pastor Mitchell's personal conduct that directly impacted the integrity of the church, leaving out any explosive details that could preemptively compromise the process. I sent it, my hand trembling as I clicked send, the soft whir of my laptop fan suddenly deafening in the silence of my apartment, knowing that with that single action, the carefully constructed facade of my family's life and my father's ministry was irrevocably set to shatter, and there would be no turning back from the path of truth. The meeting with the church board was a surreal experience, a tableau of hushed gravity in the usually bustling church office, a space typically filled with the sounds of children laughing, choir practice echoing from the sanctuary, and the friendly chatter of volunteers. 6 stoic faces, etched with concern and a deep, ingrained respect for my father, sat around the polished oak table, their eyes fixed on me, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension in their gazes, their hands clasped or resting on the smooth wood. Deacon Miller, a kind, elderly man who had known me since I was a child, cleared his throat, his voice gentle but firm, his hands clasped before him, almost defensively. "Lauren, thank you for coming. Your letter, it raised some serious concerns for us. We understand this is difficult, deeply personal." His gaze softened with sympathy, but his resolve was clear. My father, Thomas Mitchell, was conspicuously absent, having been asked to recuse himself, the first ripple of the truth already disturbing the calm surface of the congregation's placid waters. I began to speak, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, each word a painful step into the abyss of his deception. each syllable carefully measured, deliberately chosen. I didn't begin with accusations, but with the innocuous Christmas gift, the DNA test, painting the scene of my innocent excitement, the pure joy I felt in giving it to him, the irony thick in the air. Then I revealed Claire's message, Marcus's, and the cascade of 5 more half-siblings, their names echoing in the sudden, profound silence of the room. I presented the irrefutable DNA matches, the meticulously gathered financial records, the documented inconsistencies in my father's ministry trip itineraries versus his undeniable presence at other children's milestones. I showed them photos of him, smiling, arms around these other families, at graduations and weddings, on dates he was supposedly ministering far away, serving God with unwavering dedication. The room grew silent, a profound, crushing silence, the air suddenly thick, heavy, almost suffocating. Faces paled, eyes widened in disbelief, then hardened into a pained understanding, a slow dawning horror that reflected my own initial shock. Elder Peterson, a woman known for her unwavering pragmatism and sharp intellect, slowly pushed her glasses up her nose, her gaze now fixed intently on the evidence spread across the table, not on me, her expression grim. "Lauren," she said, her voice barely a whisper, thick with profound sadness, "are you saying Pastor Mitchell has fathered 6 children outside of his marriage, over 4 decades, while preaching fidelity?" I nodded, the weight of the confirmation pressing down on me, the truth, stark and unforgiving, finally laid bare, exposed to the harsh light of professional scrutiny. The meeting stretched for hours, punctuated by stunned silences that stretched taut, almost unbearable, by murmured questions that barely broke the quiet, and by the incessant rustle of papers as the board members, their faces grim and drawn, reviewed the irrefutable evidence. The initial disbelief morphed into a profound sense of shock, then a palpable grief for their beloved pastor, their trusted spiritual guide, the man they had revered, whose words had shaped their lives. They asked about my mother, their voices laced with sympathy and a dawning understanding of her unwitting sacrifice, her lifelong devotion, and tears welled in my eyes as I explained her unwavering faith, her loyalty, her struggle with 2 jobs, her slow physical decline, all while my father had prioritized other families, other children, emotionally and financially, squandering their shared resources. The weight of that injustice hung heavy in the air, a silent accusation against the man they had revered, against the decades of his carefully cultivated persona, his carefully constructed public life. By the end, there was no denying the truth. The moral fabric of their leader, the very foundation of his ministry, was irreparably torn, shattered beyond repair, his integrity reduced to ashes. Deacon Miller, his face etched with sorrow, his shoulders slumped with the burden of this devastating revelation, finally spoke, his voice heavy with resignation, thick with a deep sadness that echoed in the silent room. "Lauren, thank you for your courage. This is devastating beyond words. For you, for your mother, for our church community, for every soul who placed their trust in him, who looked to him for moral guidance. But the truth must always prevail, however painful, however destructive it may seem in the moment." He paused, looking around at the somber, plotted, strained faces of his fellow board members, a silent communion of shared grief and responsibility settling over them. "Pastor Mitchell will be asked for his immediate resignation, citing personal and ethical misconduct that is incompatible with his sacred office and the values of this church. We will address the congregation with a carefully worded statement, but out of respect for your mother's memory and the innocent children involved, we will not go into the explicit details in public, sparing them further pain and public scrutiny. It was a compromise, a recognition of the broader damage, but it was justice. My father would lose the one thing he valued most, his reputation, his platform, his carefully cultivated legacy, and he would do so not in a quiet retirement, a dignified departure, but in public disgrace, stripped of his authority by the very institution he had claimed to serve, the very God he had preached about, his hypocrisy exposed. The next Sunday, the atmosphere at Hope Valley Community Church was thick with a heavy, anticipatory silence, a stark contrast to its usual vibrant energy, the joyous hymns, the welcoming chatter, the easy camaraderie. The announcement came not from the pulpit, which remained empty, a silent sentinel, but from Deacon Miller, his voice strained and cracking slightly as he read a prepared statement from the board, his eyes avoiding direct contact with the congregation, sweeping over their stunned faces. Pastor Mitchell, due to unforeseen personal and ethical circumstances that are irreconcilable with his position of spiritual leadership, would be stepping down immediately, with a formal retirement service scheduled for the following month. The murmurs that rippled through the congregation were palpable. Shock, confusion, whispered speculation that spread like wildfire, their faces a canvas of disbelief. Disbelief turning slowly to disillusionment. My father was there, a ghost in the front pew, his usual confident posture slumped, his silver hair seeming duller, his face ashen, his hands clasped tightly, almost defensively, clutching at a Bible that now seemed to mock him. His eyes, when they met mine across the crowded aisle, were filled with a desperate, wounded plea, a raw anguish that twisted my gut. But I offered no comfort, only a steady, unwavering gaze that held the full weight of the truth, of his deception, of my mother's broken heart. He had lost his shield, his platform, the very foundation of his carefully constructed life, and the world was watching him fall, a titan brought low by his own moral failings. His retirement service, once envisioned as a triumphant farewell, a celebration of decades of faithful ministry, became a hollow echo of what might have been, a somber, muted affair. The church was packed, a morbid curiosity drawing many, their whispers like a collective sigh, the air heavy with unspoken questions, with judgment, with a strange mixture of sorrow and grim satisfaction. But the usual heartfelt tributes and effusive praise were replaced by carefully worded, almost sterile acknowledgments of his past service, devoid of genuine warmth, lacking the usual anecdotes of his spiritual guidance. I sat in the front row, not alone this time, but surrounded by Claire, Marcus, Jessica, David, and Emily, a visible testament to the truth that now hovered, unspoken but undeniably present, in the very air of the sanctuary, their presence a silent, powerful statement, a living embodiment of his lies. During the service, a representative from the church board read a final letter, carefully worded to protect the identities of the innocent, but undeniably pointed in its message. It spoke of the paramount importance of integrity, fidelity, and truth, both in public and private life, and stated that Pastor Mitchell's departure, though regrettable, was necessary to uphold these fundamental values, to maintain the sanctity of their spiritual community, to begin the process of healing. It was a searing indictment, delivered with solemn dignity, stripping him bare of his carefully maintained moral authority, his carefully cultivated image. I watched my father, his head bowed, his once proud shoulders trembling, his hands still clasped, almost in prayer. But prayer to whom? I wondered. His legacy, built on a foundation of lies, had crumbled, leaving him isolated, exposed, his reputation shattered, his very being diminished, a hollow shell of the man he once pretended to be. It wasn't a triumphant, vengeful act on my part. It was a devastatingly quiet dismantling, an inevitable consequence of his decades of deception, a meticulous unearthing of truth that could no longer be contained. The dust settled slowly, leaving behind a new, reconfigured landscape for my life, one that was both raw and strangely exhilarating, terrifying and liberating. My inheritance, once a distant concept, a vague promise of security, was now a tangible reality, albeit one profoundly altered by the revelation of my 5 half-siblings, each now entitled to a share, a division of the meager estate that still held the lingering scent of my mother's thrift. The legal battles were complex, emotionally draining, requiring countless hours with lawyers, navigating wills and probate, but ultimately fair, ensuring each of us received a small portion of what was rightfully ours, a small measure of justice. What was left, my rightful share, I used to establish a support group, Children of Silent Secrets. It was a small beginning, an online forum and occasional in-person meetings in quiet community centers for adults who, like me, had discovered the painful truth of a parent's double life, a place for shared stories, for healing, for forging a new understanding of family dynamics beyond the conventional. The first meeting was raw, tearful, punctuated by shaky voices and shared gasps of understanding, a communal exhalation of decades of unspoken pain, but deeply cathartic, and I felt a profound sense of purpose in turning my pain into a source of solace for others, transforming my trauma into empathy, into a force for good. My relationships with Claire, Marcus, Jessica, David, and Emily blossomed, complex and sometimes challenging, full of the awkwardness of new connections and the lingering shadows of past hurts, the occasional flare-up of old resentments, but ultimately genuine, rooted in a shared experience, a shared trauma, and a shared commitment to truth. We were learning to be a family, bound not by a shared deception, but by a shared, hard-won truth, slowly rebuilding a sense of belonging in this new, expanded family, a family forged in the crucible of betrayal, but solidified by shared understanding and fierce loyalty, a true testament to the resilience of the human heart. We discovered common interests, similar quirks, shared mannerisms that spoke louder than any genetic test, weaving a new tapestry of connection. My father, Thomas Mitchell, faded into a quiet, almost reclusive existence, his once vibrant presence now a dim shadow. He left Hope Valley, his name synonymous with scandal, and moved to a small, nondescript town in Florida, far from the echoes of his past, the judging eyes of his former congregation, seeking anonymity. I heard through distant relatives that he attended a different church, a small, anonymous congregation, no longer in any leadership capacity, simply a quiet congregant in the back pew, his once booming voice silenced, his moral authority evaporated, his charisma a faded memory, a phantom. He lived with the quiet, devastating consequences of his choices, his carefully constructed reputation shattered, his public image irrevocably tarnished, forced to confront the quiet, desolate truth of his solitary life, the profound loneliness of a man who chose lies over genuine connection, who chose a facade over true intimacy. I never sought to gloat, never desired his suffering, only his accountability, his acknowledgement of the truth, a reckoning with the lives he had so carelessly broken. For me, the journey was one of profound healing, of peeling back the layers of deception to find a stronger, more authentic self, a woman who finally understood the true meaning of integrity. I learned that truth, however painful, is ultimately liberating, a foundation upon which genuine connections can finally be built, a bedrock of honesty that cannot be shaken, a firm ground beneath my feet. My mother's memory, once tinged with the bitterness of his deceit, now rested in a place of peace, her unwitting sacrifice acknowledged and honored by the truth, her love finally untainted by his lies, a pure, unblemished beacon. I had chosen to shatter a comfortable illusion, not out of malice, but out of an unyielding commitment to reality, to integrity, to my own self-worth, and in doing so, I had found not just half-siblings, but a whole new understanding of family, of faith, and of the enduring power of choosing authenticity over the suffocating weight of a long-held secret. The innocent Christmas gift had indeed destroyed my family as I knew it, but from its ashes a truer, more resilient one had risen, shining with the hard-won light of honesty, a beacon for a future built on unwavering truth, a future I was finally ready to embrace, not as a victim, but as a survivor, strong and irrevocably whole.